I finally addressed my fair market value calculations for raw books just in time for this disaster of an order. Hey there, today I have an unboxing video, and in this video I'm going to open up an order of comic books from Mile High Comics that I placed towards the end of June 2023. And I'm probably too harsh in my assessment that it was a disaster of an order, but this was one of those times where I was looking for books of a certain era, and I found a title in particular where I saw a run of books from the Bronze Age, and I didn't quite do the homework that I typically do in terms of understanding, are the prices for these books after the Mile High Comics coupon is applied. Is it worth the risk? Is there value to be had if I acquire the books raw or if I get them graded like I typically do? And I was more worried or concerned that these books would be snatched up by other people who typically look for these types of books. So I saw that they were available. I acted very quickly. I ordered the books. The other thing, kind of my rule that I broke, is I try to place orders when the Mile High coupon is maxed out at 60%, and I placed this order during June when it was only 50%. So I think what I'm saying in terms of a disaster is that I overpaid for these books, especially with looking at some of the books that I've been picking up from Infinity Comics as compared to these books. The condition that I'm getting from Mile High is definitely better overall, but is it that much of a difference where it's worth paying the extra money that I paid? So I want to show you what I did end up ordering, especially that one particular title where I said I found a few books from that era that I target from Mile High. And then I'm excited to show you how the new calculation works for looking up the fair market value of the raw book and how I actually tie that into the grade that I assign the book. But before we get to that, we need to see the comics, so let's go ahead and get this order opened up. All right, here is the order that I placed with Mile High Comics around June 26, 2023, I believe. I always select FedEx when I'm checking out. Once I've unlocked free shipping, it defaults to USPS. I flip it to FedEx. There's no additional charge. I love the FedEx process from Mile High. It's very routine. I know what to expect, and it always arrives promptly in this FedEx envelope. So let's open it up. Okay, let's get into the books. Here we go. The first book is Elektra, number 3. This one is an interesting comic. It is a great Elektra cover by Greg Horn, part of the Marvel Knights series from the early 2000s. But there is a recalled version of this book where towards the end of the book, you can see Elektra without any clothing on. And I didn't necessarily buy this thinking that Mile High doesn't know about this. Sometimes things slip in there. You might get an autographed copy or something like that. But I will check this out to see if this is the recalled version. If it is, it has a lot more value. But I ended up picking it up because it is probably a run that I'm going to look to collect, as those Greg Horn covers of Elektra are pretty memorable. Next is Uncanny X-Men number 161, a great cover by Dave Cockrum. The significance of this issue is that it is the origin of Magneto. And for me personally, I remember picking up a copy off of eBay in a lot of X-Men books, and this one had a bunch of mold on the back, and it was really awful, and I immediately went to the trash outside and threw it away, and ever since then, just kind of got freaked out with the severe amount of mold on the back of the book. Now, anytime I'm able to pick up this book in high grade, I do it. The only thing I could see is there's some ink stains right there, like across the trade and across the art there, right in here. So that's unfortunate, and sometimes that happens where you'll get like a definite 9.4, 9.6 candidate from Mile High, and then there's ink stains, color rubbing sometimes, things like that. It looks to be, a typical strong 9.2-ish, 9.4 maybe copy from Mile High. but I'm always on the lookout for this book. Same with the next X-Men book. I have several copies of this and always like picking up. It is the first appearance of Forge, art by John Romita Jr. And I have so many copies of this that it's kind of starting to be an example of what I'm doing with my collection, which is I'm starting to weed out the lowest grade copy that I have. And by weed out, I mean auction off, sell off, just kind of get rid of in a way at whatever price I can get, because I know that I've been kind of gambling with conditions sight unseen, and I'm trying to keep the highest grade possible for my PC. And again, this is probably pretty typical, a light stack increase, a one minor color breaking spine tick. Again, it's just enough of something wrong with it that would keep it from being a 9.8 candidate, even with a press, but probably maxes out at a 9.6. And again, just, paying that premium to pick up the high grade books from Mile High. Next is the title that I kind of hinted at in the beginning. This is Thor 213, featuring cover art by Jim Starlin. And I had noticed on Mile High that they had a run of Thor books from the Bronze Age listed in near mint condition, and I just try not to hesitate on those and feel like I need to strike. I am a big collector of the 20-cent covers. So we've got a 20-cent cover, a book listed in near mint. The values aren't necessarily there, I think, for these books in like an 8.0 or an 8.5. Kind of the entry point to what you'd consider to be high grade. But this looks to be in great shape. Again, just a couple of spine ticks. May not be considered color breaking because it's miswrapped. So if it's right in here where the back cover is wrapping around, exposing kind of the white of the back cover, and the tick is there, right in here is where I'm talking about. It's so difficult to see, but maybe you could see it right there. It's just slightly creased. But overall, a very, very presentable high-grade copy. And anytime I see the 20-cent cover, I typically react and see if it's something that I want to pick up. Next, we've got Thor 216 with cover art by Gil Kane and John Romita. And as the cover says, this is it. It's the final battle with the 4D Man. I forgot to check and see if this is the 4D Man's first appearance or last appearance. But another great 20-cent cover. Condition looks to be very similar to 213. I'm seeing a spine tick right in here, right there. It's so faint. I don't know if that could be fixed, but really, really strong, nice high-grade copy of Thor 216. Next is Thor 223. We've moved into the 25-cent covers, but I really like this dynamic cover here. Cover art by Gil Kane on this one. Maybe it's technically a bondage cover. I don't collect those, but I know some people do, so I don't know if this is more collectible than the other Thor books. This looks to be pretty good as well. A little bit of corner damage right in here, just right there, just slightly bent. Would definitely benefit from a press, but I can see just a slight color break here. But you can kind of see when these books are classified as near mint from Mile High, these really are books with vibrant colors that present very, very well preserved by Mile High. It's just you have to pay a price to get them in this higher grade condition, which I do like to do. The last book here, another Thor book to finish the run, is Thor 228. This is cover art by Rich Buckler. Again, they just don't make covers like this anymore. You've got word balloons and full action top to bottom all the way through this great cover here. And Thor 228 is interesting because it is the origin of Ego, the living planet. So a nice little minor key bonus for this book here. So really a very, very nice collection of some great Bronze Age Thor books with some really awesome cover art from some of Marvel's best. And then along with a couple of X-Men keys and that really dynamic and awesome Greg Horn Elektra #3 that I'll definitely have to check out and see if it is that recalled version. Now I want to show you what I paid for these books and compare the cost of these books to the fair market value using my upgraded utility to do that. And then also I can compare the cost against the values if I were to get these books professionally graded And as always, my theory with Mile High is it's really not about the raw book value acquisition. It's the potential of these high grade comics getting graded out professionally and looking at the potential of this order if I were to get them graded. So let's take a look at those numbers. All right, here is that order that I placed with Mile High Comics on June 26, 2023. I was invoiced $182 for this order. I did not have to pay for shipping. I did have to add $5 of insurance to the order, which I always add. And it's just based on the total amount of the invoice. So you can see what I paid, and also you can see that I only was able to get 50% off the list price. Now, again, I'm thinking that it's a condition lottery, right? So I'm picking up those Thor books for $30 a pop, and even though they're not keys per se, you could argue maybe the origin of Ego is a minor key, but it's that additional gamble into the investment of the book that it could grade out at a much higher grade. But I want to show you what I was talking about in terms of what I've changed when I'm taking a look at the raw book value and how it compares to the value that I pull back from cover price. So right now, if I do not have a grade assigned to the book, it just defaults to the most common grade and value, which in some cases, this was part of the problem, was that these books would have sort of a default value and grade that was somewhere, maybe a VF, but if you had it in near mint, it was worth a lot more, as it should. But it was all over the place. Sometimes the value of a fine copy, because it had more of a recent sale and the book became popular, then that was worth more according to cover price than a near mint copy, and it was kind of a mess. It's still a bit of a mess, but I'm able to really more accurately line up the grade that I personally assigned to the book to cover price. So I'll show you an example. We've got Electra number 3, and if I assign it a 9.4, it continues to be $7, but if I switch it to a 6.0, then it drops to 6. So in those cases where I don't have near mint books, and that was kind of what I was always doing, was I was assuming that the books that I was purchasing, when they were listed and advertised as near mint, then I would just figure, well, I'm just going to use the near mint value of 9.4 or the highest value, because even if a fine copy is higher than the near mint, it's probably just because the near mint value hasn't caught up in the system. So I was just assigning the highest value to near mint. So I've gotten rid of that logic and replaced it with a sort of one-to-one condition mapping from my assigned grade to the cover price grade ranges. However, all of these books were listed in near mint, so I would certainly expect them to be 9.4, just like anybody would. So if I do assign the 9.4, you can see the column U shift a little bit, where we're now looking at the near mint values as provided by cover price. And then if you look at the total cost of the book in column Z and compare it to column AA, here, the raw value, and this is always the painful part. If I were to take all of these books, label them as a 9.4, and relist them somewhere for sale, I would lose $102 based on the raw values as compared to what I paid. It's painful to look at, but if you look at the CGC side, if I were to get all of these books graded and they all came back 9.4 and I was able to move all of them, I would stand to positively add around $50. And that's mainly due to Thor 213 having a nice CGC value in a 9.4 of over $100 at $116.33. So that, when you see that number, then it's like, okay, well, the $30 doesn't seem so outrageous, or I guess more technically the $30.71, because that's with the insurance of $5 distributed across all the books. Then you can start to see that positive add. However, not every book has that. Thor 216 and 223 are $60 each, so by the time you get them graded and have them shipped back to you, it's kind of a wash. Nice to see Thor 228 at $95. That's a nice $31.60 value add. But I was really hoping Electra 3 and the 2 X-Men books would be closer to 9.8, because in a 9.4, those books would be considered a loss. Now, I also like to look at the ceiling in terms of value, because I believe that the rising tide raises all ships. So I want to see what kind of values we're looking at if these books are all a 9.8. and I don't expect them to be, but if they were, this order of 7 comic books, if they all grade out at 9.8, could potentially add almost $2,400 of value to my collection. Now, again, that's not what I'm saying, is that they will all be 9.8s and this is the value. What I try to look at is, if I'm going to place an order like this, I need the 9.8 values to be strong enough and high enough so that when I'm buying high grade copies, maybe it's just a grade or 2 or 3 in a worst case underneath the 9.8, and hopefully the 9.8 continues to rise and those higher grade copies rise with it. That's my working theory. That's the working theory I've been using. Obviously, it depends on that 9.8 value being strong. And as we know with today's market, comics across the board are losing values or are not as high as they were maybe a couple of years ago. But nevertheless, I like to look at the values because then it lets me figure out and make the decision as far as whether or not this book is even worth pursuing. Thor 228 is a big standout. $1,175 in a 9.8, because that book has that minor key distinction of being the origin of ego. It's nice to see all of the other books sitting well over 100. So even Electra 3 just being the standard copy that is not the recalled version, $137.33 for that. So that's also why, if you're asking why did you pay $20 for that book, I see it shows all the time in dollar bins. If it's close to a 9.8 or a 9.8 candidate, I would pick it up because it does have some nice value here in a 9.8. Thor 213's 9.8 value over 500. 216 at almost 400, 223 at 234, 161 for X-Men, over $200 for that book in a 9.8. I'm still looking for it in a 9.8. That particular copy, I don't know what the ink streaks, what that's going to do. I'd have to look up and see what CGC does with that. And then X-Men 184, hoping that one of my copies that I have that could be maybe get a little bit of humidity and a nice press, hoping that I can get one of those copies in a 9.8, as it has a value of almost $137. So those are the books that I picked up from Mile High Comics. I do always appreciate and enjoy picking up those Bronze Age books with the 20-cent cover. I love those. I will pay extra for them because I like having them in as high grade possible. I do feel like over time, those specific comics, while not all of them are keys or books of significance, I think that getting those in the kind of high grade condition that I can get them in from Mile High, I do believe that those will dry up after a while. And it's also a situation where, from an investment perspective, it's kind of a money back sort of thing too. I can buy Thor 223 for $30. I can go through the process of getting it cleaned up and graded. And if I don't get the 9.6 or 9.8 on it, if I get a 9.2 or 9.4, it is a situation where, well, the gamble didn't quite pay off and I would be able to get my money back. But as a collector and kind of a curator of that age of books, I don't mind paying for the additional investment in those, because if you were to compare those books and you're getting them from Infinity Comics and you're like, I don't know why you're paying $30 when you can get them at auction for $3 or $4. Well, yes, that's true, but I don't necessarily plan on reading these Bronze Age comics physically. If I'm going to read any of those older comics, I do digitally. So this is really more around the collecting side and the investing side. And now that I have my formulas updated, I can more accurately hone in on those specific books that not only have the graded potential value, but also getting a better idea of what the values of the books would be if I were to keep them raw, thanks to that updated logic that is now part of my spreadsheet. What do you think? Is it worth paying a little bit extra to secure a book in high grade, even if it's not a 9.8? When we're talking about comics from the early 1970s, does condition even matter, or are you a 9.8 or bust kind of collector? I'd love to get your feedback. Feel free to drop a comment. And if you like what I do here, please consider becoming a channel member, where you can unlock additional perks and also participate in my monthly giveaways. And to do that, you'll just click the join button under this video or visit my YouTube channel at youtube.com/moneyballcomics. And there's membership information on my channel page. Thanks for watching. Happy collecting, and see you next time.